Hi there, my name's Ben, and I like to read. Today we're going to be reviewing a book by Jack London, and that is The Sea Wolf. So, a little bit of background about the author. Jack London is a fiction writer. Of course, he's an American. He's most famous for his nature books, such as White Fang and Call of the Wild. There was also, arguably, you could call it the first dystopian novel, really, which I haven't read yet, and we should probably do a review on soon. It's called The Iron Heel. And yeah, essentially he, throughout his life, he's one of the most celebrated authors of his generation. So he operated within the late 19th, early 20th century. And yes, he was also an avid outdoorsman. He actually did a tour on a whaling vessel when he was 17. And essentially, that's what inspired this book in particular, The Sea Wolf. So, a little bit of a plot synopsis. We have a gentleman from San Francisco named Humphrey Van Weyden. He's essentially this, very pampered city boy kind of guy, doesn't work with his hands, goes around high society, a little bit of a snob, but again is, a little bit, clumsy. People he has that innate potential within him, but people are like, it's Humphrey, he's kind of a screw up. He probably won't ever amount to anything. He's got his parents' money, so on and so forth. So essentially, the crux of it is he's on a ferry in San Francisco. This ferry sinks. A bunch of people die. Humphrey's clinging on to dear life to a little bit of the wreckage, and he's picked up by this whaling vessel called the Ghost. And the Ghost is captained by this tyrannical man by the name of Wolf Larsen, who is in all respects of the word a savage. Very, very Darwinian, survival of the fittest at all cost. He's brutal, he's tyrannical, but those are his morals, essentially. He's got a remarkable way of inspiring and instilling fear into the people around him. However, you never necessarily get that it's malignant all the time. He does this because, again, this is the way that he's lived his life since he was a young boy. But also, this is the only way that he knows in order to develop, strong individuals for his team. Because again, whaling is not an easy job. I mean, this was a huge industry back in the 18th, 19th century. Commercial whaling has sort of dropped off, especially now with the whole environmental stuff. There are still a lot of I would say the most experienced ones still right now are Norway and Japan. Those are the two sort of big ones for whaling at this point. Again, there's also not much of a market for it, but whaling back in the day used to be, it wasn't just for the meat, but it was also for the oil that they had, because whale oil wasn't early combustible, and it was used for lamps before the advent of electricity. Essentially, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So Humphrey is rescued by the Ghost, captained by Wolf Larsen, and essentially he's shanghaied and forcibly conscripted as a member of the crew. So he's not returned to San Francisco. He's now essentially been kidnapped and is held prisoner on this boat. And he has to learn how to survive. So Wolf Larsen gives him no quarter, despite him being educated, despite him being, rich. Doesn't hold him for ransom, per se, but essentially throws Humphrey into this primordial, cold, and savage world that is his ship, and Humphrey has to adapt in order to survive. What we get is that Humphrey ends up, despite some initial some initial barriers, him, constantly complaining. He's never done this kind of work before. He's never had a splint. He's never even had a splinter before. He's led an incredibly pampered life. But there's even passages in the book where he describes his hands having become coarsened. Now they look like a man's hands. He's gotten thinner, more muscular. He has adapted so well to the situation that he if anything, he is Wolf Larsen through being this tyrannical captain and through essentially putting him in this savage environment that, for all intents and purposes, we didn't expect him to survive. He ends up thriving in it. And the novel comes to a head, especially when we encounter another group of people who've been shipwrecked. A lady is rescued as well, and this is sort of where the showdown between Humphrey and Wolf Larsen sort of comes to its head, because it's been boiling up, and Humphrey makes no bones about it. He does not like Wolf Larsen at all. He admires him, and there is a sort of a scene where Wolf Larsen's after helping everybody out, and he's resting, and there's Wolf Larsen's a very physically imposing man, so he's got his shirt off and everything, and Humphrey admires him and says, "Oh, well, God made you well," because again, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's looking really fit, he's looking buff, he's looking like a beefcake. He's also, God made him well in the sense that he's able to adapt to such a savage environment and essentially be the lord of it. He is the apex predator. He has climbed to the very top of the mountain, and he holds court and he reigns supreme over this little world that he has built. So there's a lot of subtext within this novel as well. Essentially, like I said, it comes to a head. There's this lady who becomes the object of affections between Humphrey and Wolf Larsen. Humphrey and the lady end up getting marooned on an island, and they have to end up surviving together. But ultimately, the where the book really wins is it shows the journey of Humphrey, and it paints this vivid and frightening and accurate this world of absolute savagery. And I mean, this doesn't just have to apply to a whaling boat. You can take this ecosystem that Wolf Larsen reigns over and has created and has thrived in, and you can put it in a corporate setting, you can put it in a military setting, you can put that in a family setting. This is very much you can believe that there are people in positions of power within these hierarchies who organize and create these worlds where it is sink or fucking swim. And I think what Jack London does a fantastic job of, obviously it's clear that he essentially is the Humphrey in this story. He identifies more with Humphrey in the sense of you have to overcome this, but you still have to remain moral, and you can't remain, so nihilistically savage and everything else. But I don't necessarily think that's a big strength. I think that where London really, really thrives is the fact that he gives due respect to Wolf Larsen's worldview, because he acknowledges that, if this did not happen to Humphrey, if Humphrey was not thrown in this situation against his will, he would have continued to be this, fat, slightly effeminate, not a, he would continue to be a doormat. He wouldn't develop into the man that he is. And Humphrey at this point is already approaching middle age in this book. He's already, late 20s, early 30s, which for the time is why aren't you married yet? Why don't you have kids? And so on and so forth. But this experience actually helps Humphrey to develop into such a man that you really can't help but be caught up in that journey. You watch the progression of Humphrey, and you think, wow, and if anything, even though London is clearly biased towards Humphrey, you have to give it to be well, this system clearly works, because how else can, like, in what other scenario would a complete abject loser like Humphrey Van Weyden end up being the number one contender versus this animalistic and savage king that is Wolf Larson, right? It's the, top 10 anime comeback stories. It's unreal. I think that's the real strength of the book. And I think that's despite London's intentions. I think you have to look at it, and it does certainly make the case for social Darwinism. That's a whole nother video that we can discuss. And again, that comes with its good and its bad things. I would say, though, with regards to this book, I really, really enjoyed it. I was forced to read this against my will in first year university for my English class, and our professor was I have to say, looking back on it now, it was a great class. It was a funny class, but he was certainly a little bit of a tyrant. He loved books about the sea for some reason, and he would always yell at us to underline the title of our novels. So that's so this book always brings back those memories for me. I will say, though, it's of actual text, it's like 300 odd pages. What's great about my version, I have the Oxford World Classics, is that it has 2 appendices in there, and it also has explanatory notes by Jack London as well. So because there's a lot of whaling terms in here that a lot of people might be like what exactly are they talking about? There's a lot of sailing jargon as well. So there are some explanatory notes to sort of help with that. And they are if you're unfamiliar with that, they are necessary. But it's nice that London does provide those appendices and that and those notes as well. It's a relatively easy read. It's good cadence. I think that if you were a fan, if you've read White Fang, if you've read Call of the Wild or any of Jack London's other books, The Sea Wolf reads the same way. I think you would. I think you'd really enjoy it if you haven't picked this one up. I wouldn't necessarily say this is one of his lesser known ones, but obviously this of the 4 that I mentioned, including this one, it is certainly the least well known. But I would say it's look, as a book that encapsulates this hermetically sealed ecosystem of kill or be killed, dog eat dog, and everyone's wearing bacon pants. You have to fight and claw, your way through splinters and whales and tyrants in order to become the man that or the person that you're supposed to be. It's a great book. It's fantastic. I didn't appreciate it when I first read it. Upon reading it a second time, I was absolutely blown away. I gotta recommend this to everybody. Do not skip out on this one. If you've read it, or if you've read any other Jack London, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were. And if you haven't read it yet, go on Amazon, go to your bookstore, call your mama, call your dad, pick this book up by any means necessary. Go to your local library. Shout out to all the librarians, and let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.